All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. As folks begin to filter into the room, welcome. We are so pleased to have you joining us today for this conversation about a year of being with and a year of welcome, and our friends from Episcopal Migration Ministries sharing a bit. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of the Episcopal Parish Network, and we are thrilled to have this group together to share for the next hour or so. And we are also thrilled to have many of you getting ready to join us in Jacksonville in about a week's time for our 38th annual conference. So I look forward to welcoming many of you all there and sharing throughout the year with additional of these digital workshops. Look for more information about coming workshops on fundraising, accounting, parish administration that'll happen in the next couple of months. But without further ado, we're going to hand it off to Sarah and let her begin our conversation. And thanks to all of our panelists for joining, and again to EMM for helping to facilitate this conversation. Sarah?
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's panel discussion with EMM entitled A Year of Welcome with Episcopal Migration Ministries. I am Sarah Shipman, and I have been the Director of Operations for EMM since August of 2022. And it has been a privilege to see the outpouring of support and interest from local congregations in the work of welcome. It is our hope that today's conversation provides you with a greater understanding of how your involvement and support in the refugee resettlement program is integral to ensuring that individuals and families receive the welcome, friendship, and direct support needed to establish a home here in the United States. We have many ways for you to use your gifts, your energy, and your skills to help us build a more welcoming community. And we look forward to partnering with you. And we're always available to help you figure out the right path for your group. Thank you for being here today. I also look forward to seeing some of you in person at the Episcopal Parish Network Conference next week. But I'm now going to turn it over to the Reverend Canon Chuck Robertson for our opening prayer.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Joe and the good folks at the Episcopal Parish Network for providing this opportunity for us. On behalf of the Most Reverend Michael Curry, the presiding bishop and primate of the Episcopal Church, I welcome you all and am delighted to hear from these remarkable individuals who will be our guest speakers today, and also welcome hearing your questions as you provide those. Please do follow the instructions that are being given on that. As we come together, we do so in prayer, not just for this time, but all the time, for those who are in such need and who would be very easy for many of us to ignore or neglect. So let's take a moment to intentionally pray. And I use here an adaptation of a prayer from our Anglican friends across the ocean in the Church of England. Let us pray. Most merciful God, look with mercy on those who today are fleeing from danger, homeless and hungry and in need of hope. Bless those who work to bring them both hope and relief. Inspire generosity and compassion in all our hearts, and guide the nations of the world towards that day when we will all rejoice in your kingdom of justice and peace. Amen.
Thanks so much, Canon Chuck. And we'll just take a second for my colleague Kendall to get our slide deck playing. Excellent. Thanks so much, Kendall. Well, it's so good to be with you all today. It's been a little while since we've been on an Episcopal Parish Network digital workshop, but we're so glad to be back with you all. And thanks to Joe and your team for inviting us to be here today. So as Sarah mentioned, our goal today is to have a conversation that provides congregations, many of you here on the call may represent a parish in the Episcopal Parish Network or another congregation or organization. Our goal is to talk with you all about the different ways that your group, be it a church or a community organization, can be involved in the work of welcome. EMM is in an exciting place in its life After many very difficult years, we're on the precipice of growth, and we're so excited to share opportunities with different organizations, churches, community groups about ways that you can partner with us. And in fact, we have a very specific goal for our time with you today. We're hopeful that by listening to this conversation, at least 10% of you will be motivated to take the welcome assessment, which you can find at episcopalmigrationministries.org/ways to welcome. And I'm sure that link will be popped in the chat box several times throughout today's meeting. But that's our real hope, is that by listening to the conversation today, you're inspired to work with members of your congregation or your community group to sit down together and have a conversation about all the questions that are in the Ways to Welcome assessment, and that you'll send that in to us. So the other thing I wanted to encourage you to do is that because we're on the precipice of growth, we need support to grow. So whether or not you're able to submit that Ways to Welcome assessment and have further conversation with us about ways to formally partner, we do hope that you'll support our ministry by making a donation of any size. They all matter, and they all help us serve to welcome our newest neighbors. So you can donate by mail, just sending a check. You can make your gift over the phone, or you can visit bit.ly/support EMM to make a contribution online. So thank you in advance, because every small bit of support really matters and helps us grow as an organization. So to frame our conversation today, I wanted to give a brief description of the Ways to Welcome through EMM before turning to a conversation with our panelists. In general, the Ways to Welcome through EMM can all be categorized under the banner of sponsorship. And sponsorship, at its most basic definition, is the pairing of refugees or other refugee-like populations, individuals who are seeking asylum, for example, with groups of individuals or organizations. So this could be a church, a book club, a university club, a business. It's pairing of those two together so that the organizations can commit to providing clearly defined financial or in-kind contribution and services to support the newcomers' welcome and integration. And the ways that sponsorship looks vary widely. It's a very diverse kind of catch-all term. And the ways that it varies has to do with your geographic location, the past experience of the prospective sponsorship group, the immigration status of the person that you're sponsoring. But at the end of the day, it does come down to the very basic relationship of a group welcoming a newcomer into their community and providing clear supports to help them in their pathway towards integration and establishing their lives in the United States. The ways that sponsorship looks and how you'll live into sponsorship if you choose to take those steps forward with us varies based on a number of factors, like I mentioned: geographic location, your past experience, your capacity for fundraising and friend raising to help you with the work, the immigration status of the person you're welcoming, as I mentioned, and also the number of people that you have the capacity to welcome. At the end of the day, though, sponsorship boils down to the work of providing welcome and support to newcomers and walking alongside them during their first several months in the United States. It includes such activities as picking up your new neighbors at the airport, setting up their apartment or their first home, offering friendship, fostering community connections, helping people get their first jobs, enrolling children in school, supporting the learning of English, and so much more. Fun things like going to the pool, getting your first public library card, all of those wonderful things. And our goal at EMM, the reason we called this webinar a year of welcome, is that we're on the precipice of such growth. This is going to be a very exciting year for our organization, for our life as a ministry of the Episcopal Church. And we want to work with as many different types of groups as possible on all forms of sponsorship. So again, just to remind you, what we really hope that you do as a consequence of listening to the conversation today is to take that Ways to Welcome assessment. And I know Kendall will pop that in the chat later on, and we do hope to see your responses come in, and we'll be in touch with you as we receive them. So with all of that having been said, with that framing and context, I'm excited to get started on our panel discussion with my colleagues and friends. So first, I'll have the panelists introduce themselves individually, and then I'll start asking them questions in a round-robin style. As you listen to the conversation, feel free to post your own questions in the Q&A box, which Kendall Martin is watching over, and Kendall will be fielding questions to me to ask the panelists later in the conversation. So I'm going to have my colleague Ishel introduce herself, followed by Susan and Hezbollah. Over to you, Ishel.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Ishil Nart Alexander. I work at EMM, Episcopal Migration Ministries, as a community sponsorship lead in the post-arrival team. Very, very happy to be here to talk about various ways of partaking in the refugee resettlement work here with you. I have been working at EMM since November 2021, and prior to joining EMM, I worked for 7 years in a volunteer-based organization working with international students. And prior to that, I worked in the refugee processing center in the Istanbul office. So working with refugees who are getting ready to be resettled in the US from Turkey. So that's a little bit about me. I'm hoping to hear your questions and comments today. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Gundlach. I'm very, very happy to be here this afternoon and looking forward to our conversation. I am a senior program officer for Remote Placement Community Partners here at EMM. I've been with the organization for just over 1.5 years, but I have over 20 years of experience in refugee resettlement. I started as a volunteer, managed a local resettlement organization, and have worked nationally in refugee resettlement. I'm very excited to talk about sponsorship and the involvement of congregations, as this is a piece of resettlement that's very near and dear to my heart. So thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, EMM, for having me today in this great conversation. I'm Hizbullah Baryal. I'm an Afghan refugee who arrived in the United States 5 months ago. Currently, I'm working as a program director for data science, natural and applied sciences with Loyola University, Maryland. I'm a youth activist, human rights defender, and previous United Nations employee. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And for the audience, one thing I neglected to say is that if you'd like to put on closed captioning for today's conversation, if that would help you appreciate and enjoy the conversation more, in the bottom of your Zoom window, you click the CC icon, and that will allow you to have closed captioning throughout today's conversation. So thank you all so much for those introductions. And I'm so excited to get the conversation started because you all bring such unique and thoughtful approaches and insights into the work of resettlement. So Ishil, I want to start with you. Could you talk to us about why sponsorship is so important for the welcome and integration of our new neighbors?
Thank you, Allison. So, well, from the earliest days of the resettlement in the United States, communities have been an integral part of the resettlement work and the backbone of the process, actually. Especially various types of community sponsorship, including co-sponsorship with local resettlement organizations like EMM's affiliates. They do link the community groups and congregations with newcomers, and they provide new arrivals with financial, practical, and maybe more importantly, emotional help from the first days of their arrival. Community sponsor groups do more than just assisting the resettlement agencies, but they also ensure that the refugees are not only welcomed, but accompanied, empowered, and loved, and that the communities hosting them take ownership, responsibility, and pride in doing what they do. Community sponsorship is a collaborative effort between groups of people that work together to prepare for and welcome refugees they are paired with. Community sponsors groups can come from faith communities, businesses, other civic or social groups, or may include individuals who come together to form a sponsorship group. They help refugees obtain food and clothing, access medical care, navigate the community, find jobs, and ultimately build a future. With community sponsors, refugees receive far more support than they might have otherwise. And as a result, the quality of life for refugee families is immeasurably enhanced on the long run. And this model harnesses the power of private-public partnerships between community volunteers and local service providers to ensure the independence and self-sufficiency of our new neighbors. When neighbors join together as community sponsors to offer support to new arrivals, refugees are more likely to thrive in dignity and safety and integrate into the community and find success as new Americans. Community sponsors are also changing the way that we welcome refugees. This model is having a positive impact on everyone, not only on refugee families, but also on volunteers and the communities they call home. Not only does sponsorship offer the sponsors a chance to bring positive change to their communities, but it also allows them to develop their own skills in cross-cultural communication and to participate in a global community, bringing awareness to the challenges faced by people forced to seek refuge. Reintegration is not something that can be taught or learned from books. Obviously, it requires personal interaction and building relationships with people in the community. So arriving in a new country is highly complex, and when a newcomer has a local community member next to them to go through the bureaucracy and the adjustment phase, it fast tracks their integration. A community sponsorship program helps create these personal connections. At a time of widespread xenophobia and deep-rooted structural racism, unfortunately, community sponsors actually can create a critical mass of support for refugees and a powerful antidote to fear and hatred. Communities better understand that refugees are assets to the societies that receive them, rather than just people in need. Community sponsorship programs also invite broad-based involvement in the work of welcoming, receiving, and integrating newcomers. In this way, they foster a fruitful dialogue between government entities and many segments of civil society, including refugees themselves and the private sector, which provides all vital financial support in addition to the government funding. EMM and our affiliates invest in community sponsors training and orientation, giving them valuable resources and tools for working with families. So we look forward to working with you too if you choose to go this way. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ishil. I love how you said so many important things in that answer. It was like packed with like gems of information. And it's a great segue to the question I want to ask you, Susan. So just a few of the themes that you brought up, Ishil, that I think Susan will also speak to from her personal experience are how sponsors help newcomers feel accompanied and empowered. They help people kind of build a firm foundation so they're more likely to thrive, and it sets them up for integrating into their new communities in a more expeditious way. That's not so difficult. They have someone like an American friend that can help them navigate these new systems, which is so important. And I also love what you said about how sponsorship and community sponsor groups help serve as antidotes for parts of the fissures and the kind of more toxic elements of our society that come from places of fear and places of misunderstanding, and they start to break down those walls of fear. So thank you so much. That was such a wonderful answer. And I can't wait to hear from Susan. Susan, you mentioned in your introduction how you came into this work as a volunteer, and then you have been part of a co-sponsorship group at your Lutheran church, and then you've worked in the national level, you've been an affiliate director, so you have a very multifaceted view of resettlement from all these different perspectives. So I would love for you to talk about, from all of these perspectives that you have, what some of the joys and challenges of sponsorship are, because there are many, and the joys far outweigh the challenges, but this work is not without challenge.
Thank you, Allison. That's right. There are many joys and challenges. So, and you're right, as a director of a local resettlement agency, in that role, I was able to witness the amazing things that can happen when newcomers are supported by a congregation or community sponsor. For the newcomers, there are definite advantages, some of which Ishil touched on, such as the long-term friendship through personal relationships and interactions, strong community orientation and cultural knowledge through things like, even you mentioned at the beginning, Allison, things like trips to the zoo, visiting local festivals, trick-or-treating, or playing and watching various sporting events. There's also support that can be offered beyond the resettlement program period, which is only 90 days and a very short period of time. And those types of supports that I've seen and experienced included help with buying a first car, college applications, both for adults and for youth, buying a first house, that was always very exciting to see, job advancement, And I even was invited to a refugee wedding, which was an absolute blast to participate in. There's also clear benefits for the community sponsors. The sponsors are welcoming our new neighbors. Congregations were able to live into their faith through action. There's cultural education and awareness for both the parishioners and the newcomers, an understanding and an ability to respond concretely to global humanitarian challenges. In each of these relationships, one of the things that I saw were that boundaries were well established, and the community sponsors were good at checking in regularly with the newcomers, setting early expectations for how they would help and how long they would help. And they were excellent listeners. They provided information, they gave gentle nudges, allowing the newcomers to make their own decisions, even when they made mistakes, and then they worked with them to help overcome those mistakes. What I saw was that when the above did not happen, lasting connections were not made, and sometimes relationships were more difficult. One of the challenging things that I believe congregations experience the most is interacting with newcomers who arrive with limited English. Communication is essential to everyone's clarity and understanding, and interpreters play a vital role in initial resettlement. It takes time to learn a new language, and English is definitely no exception. But most newcomers are eager to learn, and with time they will learn to speak English. Hopefully there are volunteers in a local community who can serve as interpreters and can always rely on interpretation services which are available over the phone. However, it's important to keep in mind that it's possible to communicate even if we don't speak the same language. One of my most memorable experiences from my own church's sponsorship with refugees was that I was tasked with initial grocery shopping. I took 4 Burmese men to the grocery store. When we got to the meat section, they were completely confused. The animals were already butchered and they were prepackaged. They had no idea what any of that meant or how to understand what was what. And I had no way to communicate with them. So I thought and finally decided, well, let's just make animal noises. Hopefully they're universal, which thankfully they were. It ended up taking a very stressful situation and making it something that was actually pretty funny and enjoyable together. And at the end of the day, they had exactly what they needed for their groceries and a much better understanding of how to shop for themselves in the future. So I'll pause there and thank you.
That's one of my favorite stories. I love that story. And it shows how like human connections and like, I don't know, just bonds of friendship and affection can be built even if you don't share the same language. And that's one of the things I love the most about the work that we all do together is that those bonds of friendship and relationships are built despite language challenges or differences in background. It's really just a beautiful thing that we get to do. And it's exciting to see new groups take part in it. So I'm so excited now to ask you a question, Hezbollah, since you mentioned in your introduction that you've just been here for 5 months. And for our audience to know, Hezbollah was sponsored by a group that EMM has been working with in the Diocese of Maryland. So Hezbollah, we'd love for you to tell us about your experience as sponsorship.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would say the idea of the sponsor circle is a wonderful actually idea. It's launched by the President Biden back in October 2021. And indeed, it gave a shoulder of support to the government itself to welcome more refugees and to help them with their resettlement in the United States in a much needed time. Let me go back to your question exactly. I welcome by the sponsor circle with open arms to one of the houses in Pikesville area, Gilead House, back in September 2022. And I was very happy that I joined that sponsor circle, which was created by, I was actually supported by Erica and St. Thomas's Church. And the group of people are working there to sponsor me and my stay in the United States make more unique for me. I found this sponsor circle consists of very professional people with a variety of expertise and different backgrounds, which everyone is an asset to learn from. Given the fact each one of them is a mentor, like every day I'm meeting them, I'm in contact with them, and I'm learning many new things from them for a better life in the United States and how to adapt here in a right way. Apart from that, I'm at thousands of miles away from my family, but this group of people always made me to feel at home here. Like whatever I needed, they provided on time. Whatever was like my concern, they reached out to that, even 24 hours actually. Apart from that, I like the structure of this sponsor circle, which formed from different groups of people, which is leading like the transportation committee, the finance, the employment, the health, the education, and every one of them are very expert in those areas. Like I'm an example of one of those refugees who came into the United States back in September 2022. I got a job within this university as a program director, which is not a small position. And this was the credit goes all to the employment committee. They were working day and night to find me different kind of opportunities, train me, prepare me, mentor me to get this job. And apart from that, there were many more offers within this period of time. For the transportation, I would give you an example. Like they are helping with my driving license. They are helping me with my practices. I know how much it is costly in the US if you are going for a driving test or going to a class and how much they will charge you. But the sponsor circle is providing all these free of cost, even giving you their valuable time as well. In terms of education, in next 1 year, I will be starting my master's, my second master's here in the United States. And this is the circle that the education committee is working on that to pave the way for me to get my master in next 2 years. The finance, we have all the needed items at the house or whatever we need in our personal life and even in professional life. If we need anything, the finance team is always there to hear to us, to hear our concerns and take action accordingly. The health one is the other one. You know better that whenever a refugee came into the United States, they need to go through a specific medical checkups, and they are there to take care of all those appointments, who provide the transportation, but they have a very good coordination. It's worth mentioning that I would say that the sponsor circle is not only limited to us who sponsored me, but they are always going extra miles. Even like there are some families in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, and one of our refugees in another country, but they are extending their support to them. They are working for humanity. They are not working for a specific person or a group of people, which is very great. And I'm pretty sure God will bless them all the time. So having said that, my experience with the sponsor circle is going incredibly well, and I'm very thankful for the idea of the sponsorship that they came up to the table back in October 2021. And I hope this will extend in many more ways. Like so far, there are 800 plus refugees who are sponsored by the sponsor circle in the US. And the discussion are in the pipeline to expand this program to many more states as well. I will be happy to take more questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hajbullah. It's so exciting to hear how positive of experience you've had with your sponsorship group, and for you to outline for the audience as well the different committees and how they organize themselves so that no one member of your sponsorship group is doing all the work. It's really distributed across many members, and so you get to form relationships with so many more people than you would if the labor was all borne by just a few people. So I think that's so exciting. I'm going to ask the panelists one more question each. And as I do that, I want to encourage those listening today to think of your own questions for the panelists. As you think of your questions, please put it in the Q&A box, and those will be fielded later in today's conversation. So to go on to our second round of questions, Ishul, from your work with our affiliates, so at EMM, your primary work is to support our affiliate offices across the country, of which there are 12, on their own community sponsorship programming. And I know that through that work, you're aware of, and so many of us in this space are aware of, the important awarenesses that we want a community sponsorship team to have, like things we want you to hold in mind as you walk into the work of sponsorship so that you can do this work well and you can be successful and you can set up your new neighbor for success. So I guess another way of putting it is, what are some of the areas of personal and interpersonal growth that you've seen come from the work of sponsorship?
Thanks, Alison, for this question. I think it's very important. And I would like to answer this from a lens of learning opportunities and areas in which sponsors are looking to grow, rather than maybe like focusing on what could be challenging. Well, there's of course challenges in every work and in this work too, but looking at the learning opportunities in this work is, I think, very important. Community sponsorship, you should not take it as a type of charity where people support those who are in need of support, but it also provides the volunteers and sponsors, in other words, with an extensive area of learning opportunities. So not only in the field of refugee resettlement per se, but also about global citizenship, volunteerism, appreciating diversity, cross-cultural communication, responding to social and emotional trauma in some sense, in some cases, and unconscious or unconscious biases that we might all have. While carrying out this valuable work, volunteers participating in co-sponsor groups should be aware of several important points that I would like to mention. First of all, it is essential to show respect for newcomers. These individuals have fled their home countries and perhaps lived in refugee camps for years, or many have experienced various forms of discrimination. They are now living in a context that is totally foreign to them. Many newcomers do not speak fluent English or no English at all. They seek self-sufficiency, but initially depend on services and assistance from others. So yes, there's a lot of vulnerabilities here, but at the same time, they are individuals who have shown incredible resilience, strength, and resourcefulness while navigating all of these challenges. They deserve to be treated with the utmost respect for their journey, their culture, their individuality, and to be welcomed without pity or paternalism. We would need to keep these points in mind. Co-sponsors play an essential role in helping refugees regain a sense of control over their lives by becoming self-sufficient as quickly as possible, as part of the refugee settlement work in general. And they are encouraged to follow the guidelines provided to ensure that your new neighbors have all required services within the 90-day time frame. Another important point is that community sponsors must model tolerance and sensitivity when it comes to religious identity and practice. EMM has a strict policy against proselytizing, and even when well-intentioned, anything that could make refugees feel obligated to participate in religious activities with their co-sponsors could be disastrous, both for refugees and for a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. Community sponsors should make every effort to avoid making any gesture that could be perceived as proselytizing. Also, to keep in mind that some refugees may not practice any religion, or may not have a religion, or they may not feel compelled to adhere to any given religion. So we should definitely stay away from stereotyping or generalizations at some points. Another important point that I want to mention here, there's a lot of them, but let's just go over 3 today, is to assist newcomers. We must remain mindful of the enduring impact of trauma. We need to be aware that telling a story of persecution and flight can re-traumatize refugees. They have had to tell their stories multiple times to UNHCR and US officials, even before then in the third countries that they were waiting to be processed. So there's a lot of retelling of that, traumatizing stories, so that they could get a refugee status and to become approved to resettle in the US. So once they're here, they should be able to choose whether they want to talk about the persecution they have experienced. That being said, if they want to speak with you about what they had been going through or left behind in their home countries, please offer your listening ears to them, and that would also provide a lot of support. So far, I think these are some most important points, but of course, like this all come with a wonderful joy and celebration of forming all these relationships with the community members. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Sushil. As I hear you talking about it, it's really about centering the decisions and the agency of the newcomer, right? And sometimes for those of us who are, have been in the United States for a long time, it can be hard for us to get out of the way and to create space for the newcomer to walk their own path. But that's really the ministry of sponsorship at the end of the day, is accompanying, but not being the director, right? Walking alongside, but not walking in front of, right? So I love all those things that you said. And I think it's especially important to focus on respect and also just be cognizant of like trauma-informed service and tolerance, and also just creating space for the newcomer to lead their own lives, right? So with all of that, Susan, I'm going to ask you a question as well on how would you advise prospective sponsor groups on how to engage with refugee resettlement organizations, be it EMM, an EMM affiliate, or an affiliate of another resettlement agency? And what kind of posture or approach is most helpful for the prospective sponsor group to take on as they reach out to want to help?
That's a great question, Allison. And I think this is pretty universal to the affiliates that EMM has, as well as, like you said, resettlement agencies that are not EMM affiliated. I would advise prospective sponsor groups to engage with the resettlement organizations by first and foremost being open to new experiences. This is an opportunity to serve, hopefully in a way that will meet the needs of the newcomers, the resettlement organization, and your congregation. So to do that, I would suggest first that you listen to what the resettlement organization is asking for. How can you be the most helpful and serve in the most meaningful way to the newcomers? If you are hoping to do a clothing drive, but the resettlement agency really needs furniture, how can you be responsive to and respectful of that need? Or if they're willing to take clothing, how can you be effective at getting the clothing that they need? When we were welcoming a large influx of Hmong refugees and I was a resettlement director, everyone wanted to donate clothing. The Hmong population tends to be on the smaller size physically, so I requested donated clothing that was no bigger than a size large for adults. I was flabbergasted by how many people disregarded this request and sent clothing that we had absolutely no use for. We were unable to store it, and we then had to find volunteers that could take it elsewhere so that it could be used. This was a huge burden for our organization and didn't end up being as helpful as we had expected. So please listen to what the groups that you work with need. The second thing I would suggest is to be patient. Hopefully, the local resettlement agency is receiving lots of requests from churches to support newcomers. They need to determine who can best meet the various needs of their newcomers. This takes time. They need to understand your desires and ability to serve and how those can best be matched with the needs of their newcomers and organizations. I would also say learn. How can you work with the resettlement organization to educate your own congregation, not only the adults, but also the youth? There are a lot of educational resources out there that the resettlement organizations have that can support your willingness to learn about the diversity of human cultures, language, faith, etc. Be willing to explore these and have meaningful conversations throughout your church to learn more about who your new neighbors are, what kinds of circumstances have brought them to live in your community. Be ready to learn and also ask what they bring to the richness of your community through their culture, knowledge, their skills, etc. I would also say, lastly, be flexible. Be flexible and open to new experiences. Be open to serving in multiple ways and be open to serving multiple times over time. Your congregation could start with a small project, like donating specific household items, then move up to helping set up an apartment for a newcomer family, and then move into a more formal community sponsor role where you directly serve a newcomer. My church has done exactly this. We set up one apartment a year until we were ready to formally welcome a family ourselves. And we're now working with an Afghan family that was evacuated in 2021 and brought to our community in 2022. And it's been a very valuable experience for our congregation. People were able to be involved in a different way than the furniture drives, but we knew that every single activity we were creating opened up different people in our congregation to the experience of welcoming a newcomer. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So Hezbollah, you're going to round out our questions before we hear from the audience. So I'd love to hear you share with us today, for anyone on the call who is interested in being a sponsor, what are some words of wisdom that you would share with them as they get started?
Well, first of all, I would say this program is very interesting. I can see lots of participants on the working day. Like I have been through different meetings and workshops, but this large number of participants are not joining during their working day. But this seems to be very interesting, and they are very interested to support and expand this program. So like my first thing or idea is to how they can expand this program, because so far it resulted in a positive way. If we see the history, if we see the State Department report on all those things. So to make it like more unique, to make it like more expand, it is good to bring or engage young people as well, kind of form of a volunteer group. Like we will not leave it to all these to the elder people. If we engage young people in these programs, that would be kind of an internship program for them as well. As I mentioned earlier, these people has expertise in different areas. And these young people, while working with them, not only they will be working and learning from other experiences, working with different people from different backgrounds, like from Afghanistan or other refugees from other countries, but they can also learn. Like if I go back and name like operation thing, like the transportation, the health and education, these are all like one of the position. And if these young people work with those at the sponsor circle, they will learn many new things. One. The other thing, if there could be kind of a policy group, like to bring together all these sponsor circles under one umbrella, also include resettlement agencies as well. At the end of the day, their aim is one aim, to support refugees. If they work as a collectively, if they work like as a team, and if there is a policy level group to monitor and evaluate their activities, like in each 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then they can report to the relevant authorities, maybe in the government, and that way they can like enrich and enhance this program more. And I'm pretty sure, or I think, or I'm hopeful in the future, the Congress will pass kind of act for this as well. Who knows? Because this is a very great program. I'm pretty sure it is expanding. Those who are involved in this program, I'm very thankful to them for giving their valuable time, day and night, to support the refugees, to make a better life for them. And we as a refugee, being an Afghan young boy or man, I would say like we will also be a good citizen, and we will prove that, and we are already proving it so far, to contribute to this new community. And one day we will be in a position to support back other refugees as a youth citizen in our new country. Thank you.
Thank you, Hezbollah. Thank you so much. So I'm excited that we do have some questions that have come in already from audience members. So folks, please keep posting them. Ideally in the Q&A box, because that's just going to be a little bit easier for us to manage. But if you put them in the chat box, no bother. We will see your questions. So the first question is for Hezbollah. Hezbollah, are your sponsors helping you obtain permanent status in the US? Are they helping you get your green card and on your pathway to citizenship?
Yes, I entered to the United States as a parolee, as a humanitarian parole. And upon my arrival, They took my documents and the sponsor circle along with the ERIC office. They shared it with a lawyer and they are working on it. They will submit my file soon to the USCIS office. So my answer to your question is yes. They are working on that. Even they will go with you to the interview. They are preparing you for the interview and everything. So yes, they are helping with my permanent status here in the United States.
Thanks, Hezbollah. And that element of helping individuals adjust their status to be able to have legal permanent residency in the US or be on their pathway to citizenship, that responsibility might fall on a sponsor group, depending on the type of sponsorship you're involved in. But if you are working as a co-sponsor alongside an affiliate of EMM or another national agency, that work of the legal adjustment of status usually falls on the agency. So like I said at the beginning of framing today's conversation, sponsorship is a very broad and diverse kind of definition, and it varies depending on geographic location, immigration status, which organization you're partnering with to do the sponsorship. So that's really why, if you're interested, we encourage you, anyone listening today, to fill out that Ways to Welcome assessment, because Susan and Ishil and I are actually the people who received that. And then we'll be reaching out to you to have conversation about what kinds of sponsorship would work best in your locality and how do you go forward from there. So the next question I want to ask, it's actually going to be something I address quickly before turning to some other questions. And it's asking for an explanation about sponsor circles and neighbor to neighbor and if they're the same thing. So Sponsor Circles is a program that was started initially to support Afghans. That's actually how Hezbollah was welcomed, was through a sponsor circle, through the Sponsor Circle program for Afghans. It is run by another organization called the Community Sponsorship Hub. EMM is in a formal partnership with the Community Sponsorship Hub for the Sponsor Circle program for Afghans. So the Sponsor Circle that supported Hezbollah received guidance and support from EMM, and we continue in a relationship with his Sponsor Circle. We housed our Sponsor Circle activities within our pre-existing Neighbor to Neighbor program. So if you go on EMM's website, you can learn about the Neighbor to Neighbor program today. There are two different things. Just structurally within EMM, we house them within the same program. But the Sponsor Circle program has continued to support other populations, including Ukrainians, and now Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Cubans, and Haitians. So if you're specifically interested in learning more about that program, you can always reach out to me for a conversation. Their direct website is sponsorcircles.org. So if you want to learn about the Sponsor Circle program in general, and then in EMM, we housed it within Neighbor to Neighbor. So if some of you have heard about Neighbor to Neighbor, that's where our Sponsor Circle activities have been housed. So there are some other questions that maybe, Susan, you might be well placed to just kind of think out loud about this from your perspective as a co-sponsor and as a former affiliate director. This person mentions that they sponsored an Afghan family of 10 that were part of the evacuations. They bonded beautifully with trips to the zoo and the aquarium. They provided coats and boots each year, but their new challenge is the heat bill and the cost, the rising cost of rent. So I wonder if you could just speak through some ways you've seen local groups address those challenges after initial housing is provided, but cost of housing in the US right now is quite steep. So any ideas or brainstorming you'd like to do on that?
That's a great question and definitely a huge challenge. Today, specifically, housing is less affordable than in the past and difficult to find, especially for a case of 10 family members. That's, kudos to you for the work that you're doing with them. There are a couple of governmental programs that I would strongly suggest exploring. One of them is LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Heat and Energy Program. Every state has one of these. The parameters are different depending upon the state as far as whether applications are available on a rolling basis or only a certain time of year when you can apply. But this provides subsidized energy assistance and is definitely something that I would recommend exploring. The other thing is to look at subsidized housing. Section 8 to see what types of vouchers there are. It again is all called something different in every community, I swear, but and it's difficult to say what's available. There may be waiting lists for that as well, but I strongly recommend exploring it because it can, in some communities, it can be utilized wherever there's housing. It doesn't have to be a specific block of apartments or a specific neighborhood. In some communities, it's available anywhere. It's all just based on income. So those are two of the major government programs that I would suggest exploring.
Thanks, Susan. And from that, this is not a question anyone asked. I think it just brought something to mind I wanted to ask Ishil about. Is one of the dynamics that can be so challenging for sponsor groups to work through is feeling like the sponsor group is obligated to continue providing support as opposed to lifting up the newcomers, helping them find gainful employment, helping them establish a reasonable and practical budget, those kinds of things. So can you talk about just some words of wisdom for groups that may have sponsored before or might be thinking about sponsoring? How do you help our affiliates guide their sponsor groups to set up good boundaries and not continue to give and give and give as opposed to lifting up the agency of the newcomer?
Yeah, this is a really important question. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So yes, as much as it is very integral to the sponsorship that these relationships, these organic ties between the sponsors, the community members, and the newcomers are formed and sustained, we do not expect nor encourage our sponsors to feel obligated to continue providing services outside of the service provision period, which is the 90 days. And we understand this might be difficult when you have bonded a positive relationship with an individual or a family who might be still in need. This is not the expectation from the sponsors, and it may be also difficult for them to express this to the newcomers that they have been engaging with, right? Like, because they have become friends or even like family members, it might be hard to say, I'm sorry, I cannot help you anymore. So in these cases, it's best to actually defer it to the affiliate offices or whoever the staff person is managing the program, so that it can be explained in maybe better terms or in a more professional way that would not damage the relationship. But if they are feeling comfortable expressing that this is outside of the scope of our sponsorship relationship, that is definitely acceptable and actually welcomed. And as you said, the core of this request is that the refugee resettlement program is based on building self-sufficiency for refugees within the service period time. And so we do not want them to be given the fish that someone caught for them, but we would want for them, and they would want for that for themselves, to know how to catch the fish, how to navigate the US system, how to find jobs, how to make enough money to pay their bills, etc., how to enroll their children in school, so that they can become an active member of the society as well. So in some ways, over-providing can actually be not to the benefits of the newcomers themselves. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I don't know if that answered your question, but I wanted to add something to the previous question you asked about housing. On the affiliate level, some of our affiliate offices do have private funds from Airbnb. Airbnb provides funds for providing housing to refugees. So the housing issues are somewhat supported in that way too. Some of our 4 or 5 affiliate offices do operate this program. Just wanted to add that as a supplement fund.
Thanks, Ishil. I'm going to ask Hezbollah a question next. And this might be more, it's back to the adjustment of status, Hezbollah, to getting your legal permanent residency and onward to citizenship. Were you able to find low-cost legal help to help submit different immigration legal paperwork, or how has that been working?
In my case, it is actually for free for me because I'm not paying any cost, and I don't know if the sponsor circle or the ERICA office is paying for that. I honestly don't know about that, but for me as a refugee, it is free of cost, and they are taking care of everything. So I don't know about the financial part of the cost here.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I want to ask you another question, Hezbollah, before I might take one more that Kendall shared with me. What are some things, Hezbollah, that if there are groups on the call today or individuals on the call, maybe they can't do the full sponsorship, what are some other ways that you could see them being helpful, just as individual volunteers?
Well, for refugees, I would say like helping them with their education, especially most of Afghans are coming from a war-torn country where we didn't have any quality education. And nowadays, the girls are suspended, or their schools or universities are closed, and who has been migrating to the United States, they are in much need of education. So I think education is one of the top priority for me and for all refugees. If you have educated society, you can have a great society. I mean, like if you mostly of those people, the girls or the family parts are most affected people in Afghanistan and deprived from education. So if there are people who are willing to sponsor people, I think first they should prioritize the education part. And after that, to give them a knowledge of if they are educated, to help them with their employment. We Afghans have like kind of big families, large families, and they need a support. If they don't get any support, they will be homeless in the next couple of months or years. So helping them with the employment opportunities will survive them, educating the society. And this is why America is great, and it will be greater in the future.
I do have more questions, but I want to end on that note. That was a perfect way to end the webinar, Hezbollah. Thank you. Let me look at this last question quickly to see how to phrase it as our final question. I don't want it to be our final question, so I'll just answer it quickly. This question is, those of us who work with EMM to support an asylum seeker and have a team of support at our church, how can we and EMM support individuals who are interested in types of sponsorship, but they're not members of an organization or a faith community? They're in need of your excellent training videos. How can we find a place for them in the structure of EMM? And actually, Susan, I wonder if you want to speak to that, because of the requirements we have to be a remote placement community partner might be a way to find places for non-church groups in our sponsorship work. So do you want to take that one?
Sure. EMM has a new program. It's called Remote Placement Community Partners. And this is an opportunity for a small team of individuals to resettle a refugee or refugee family. They don't have to be part of a nonprofit organization. They don't have to be a congregation. It could be me and my book club, for example, a group of individuals that somebody brings together that are interested in working together. And this group becomes a community partner and works with EMM to provide the resettlement services, the things that Hezbollah was talking about that he received, the things that a co-sponsor would be providing to a refugee case. And so that definitely, if you go in and fill out the assessment, is something that we can use as an opportunity to have a conversation about how people can be connected that aren't necessarily all part of one congregation, for example.
That's perfect. So to draw our conversation to a close, because that was the fastest hour I've had in a long time. This was so fun, and I'm so grateful to all three of you for being part of the conversation. Hezbollah, you're our new friend. Thank you so much for being part of this. So I want to ask Susan and Ishel and Hezbollah if you have any final parting words you'd like to leave with the audience before Sarah and I can kind of close down the webinar today.
Well, finally, I would say, like, go back to your question, I would call on the local universities to provide sponsorship program for like scholarship program for those young Afghan people who are living in this area. And apart from that, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. And I really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating. We didn't see you, but we felt the energy. Thank you so much for being interested in and to support refugees in one way or another. And as my colleagues mentioned, there's a welcome assessment on our website if you would like to go and check out different ways of joining this work. We are more than happy to work with you. So thank you, everyone.
I also appreciated the opportunity to be here today. It was easy to feel the energy. And I love the fact that so many people are interested in ways to welcome newcomers and the valuable work that EMM does. So thank you all for being here and joining us.
Thank you. And Sarah, my plan is to kind of take us through a few closeout slides, but I want to open the floor to you first, and you can just toss it back to me when you're ready.
Well, I'm just honored and delighted to be a part of Episcopal Migration Ministries and working with all of you who participated in the webinar today, both as panelists and sending in your questions and listening to us tell you all of the ways that you can be a part of a year of welcome with EMM. We're excited to continue this conversation, and I am sure we will all be talking again soon in the future. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Sarah. I surely hope so. And remember, folks, we're hopeful that at least 10% of those who registered today are inspired by what they've heard to fill out the Ways to Welcome assessment. That just gives us information to reach out to you to have further conversation about sponsorship and the ways in which you could work with EMM in different sponsorship opportunities. On the next slide, which I can't remember. Oh yes, I won't be in Jacksonville, sadly, but I know Sarah and Kendall are very excited to meet so many members of the Episcopal Parish Network at the annual conference next week. It's surprising that March is upon us. So look forward to seeing you all next week in Jacksonville. And I'm gonna close us with prayer and then leave you with our contact information if you'd like to reach out to us directly. This is a prayer from Daily Prayer with the Corrymeela community, which is one of Northern Ireland's oldest peace and reconciliation organizations. Let us pray. A prayer for reconciliation. Where there is separation, there is pain. And where there is pain, there is story. And where there is story, there is misunderstanding and understanding, listening and not listening. May we, separated peoples, estranged strangers, unfriended families, divided communities, turn toward each other and turn toward our stories with understanding and listening, with argument and acceptance, with challenge, change, and consolation. Because if God is to be found, God will be found in the space between. Amen. So thank you again. Thank you, Joe, and the whole team at Episcopal Parish Network for giving us this opportunity. Thank you all for being part of today's conversation. And if you'd like to be in touch with us, you can find us at episcopalmigrationministries.org. Our social media is at EMM Refugees. And you can find the video from today, I know, on the Episcopal Parish Network website. Joe posted that link earlier in the chat. We may also be able to post this on our Vimeo channel, but also you can find so many of our other webinars and content at vimeo.com/EMM Refugees. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Ishel, Susan, and Hezbollah. And we'll be talking to you all soon and see some of you in Jacksonville next week. Thank you. Bye.